So I'm here today with Mark Chen. He's better known as TMK Aquarist on Instagram. And pleasure to meet you, Mark.
Pleasure is mine, Jeff. I've been following you guys for so long, and ADG is definitely, the name to look to in terms of aquascaping and design. So I love your guys' work. Been a long time admirer. Thank you for having me on the show.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for joining me. Very much so. So, Mark, you're probably best known at this point for your discus planted tank, and as someone who has been pursuing that style for a long, long time. I got to say that anytime I see someone doing it well, I'm very impressed and also quite
Thank you.
curious. Uh, so, could you give us maybe a little background on that tank specifically? And I'm really wanting to know, is that something that kind of came together by way of an intentional approach, or did you just kind of follow your instincts and it worked?
Yeah, so give you a little bit background on the tank. I had in mind to have like a wild discus tank before I set that tank up. So, like for example, the dimension, right? Like the tank's pretty high; it's 40 inches tall, and then that specification made to custom made to that size is also like it's all basically planned to have that type of fish, right? And then I actually before I wanted discus wild discus in the grotto, I actually wanted something else. So I wanted to go autumn or some type of South America. I knew it was going to be a South American setup.
Sure.
However, during my trip I took an expedition with Heiko Bleher to Colombia,
Oh,
and
wow.
then,
Well, we're
yeah,
going to have to dive
so,
into that for sure.
oh for sure, absolutely, yeah. And two of my teammates on the expeditions were both huge wild discus experts. So one breeds them in Denmark, and one is just a very avid collector of wild discus in China. So both of them were just talking nonstop about wild discus on this entire trip. And Heiko is like
Oh,
a
yeah.
wealth of knowledge for wild discus as well.
Big
And
time.
then I kind of like just got rubbed on it. And then at first I was like, no, like I'm not really into discus because most of the discus I saw were domestic, strings. And then I just didn't like the whole array of rainbow and all that until I saw, my friends wild discus because they were showing me on their phone and everything. And yeah, like the beauty of these fish just like kind of like blew my mind because I didn't know this was a wild type, and then I just didn't know the whole side of things. And then on that trip, I decided fairly quickly that okay, I'm gonna like set up this tank to have these wild discus only, right? Wild discus only. And then one thing that really kind of I guess made me doubt my decision is that like I knew going in that it's gonna be a lot of work, right, to keep these guys. And then I kind of like was a little wary of the difficulty, right, of keeping these guys. So I did a ton of homework, and then I knew that for somebody like me who hates maintenance and water change, I will have to find a way to automate the crap out of this tank, right? And then just although like people were telling me, like there's no way you can automate a discus tank, right? Or let alone a wild discus tank. And then I
Right.
was like, well, I have to try, otherwise, like it's just not sustainable, for
Right.
me in the long run. Long story short, so I was able to figured out a way to pretty much automate like 90% of the
Wow.
maintenance. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like no water change required on my part, and then it's all done automatically. And then what I do is like every 2 weeks or so, I'll just clean out all the mechanical filtration, right, like the media. And
Right.
then obviously I do some of the nutrient dosing, or like, mineral dosing, whatever. And then that's on a weekly basis, but that takes no time at all. Like when I'm feeding the fish, I'll just do that.
Sure.
And then yeah, so that is like a very watered down version of the story. We can
Sure.
dive into all the details. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
The
that's very cool backstory there. And I'm fascinated that just the path to sort of sorting out using discus coming by way of all things, uh, an expedition with Heiko and just kind of being totally immersed in the discus energy there with these other guys and everything.
yeah,
Very cool. It now you're also the owner of a nature design studio.
I am.
Okay, cool. So you do custom installation and aquarium maintenance also.
Yes.
Is the discus tank a client aquarium?
No, that's my own.
That's your own personal tank.
Yeah, I
Very
actually
cool.
wouldn't. I actually wouldn't recommend a client to
That's a
have that
topic for
project.
exploration between you
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few out of it actually.
Right, right. No, it is a common request, and that's why I was wondering. I've certainly attempted it over the years and
Mhm.
had some go well for
Oh
for
yeah, for
some period
sure.
of time, but also experienced my share of challenges,
Mhm.
both trying domestic and wilds. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I get it. That no, I've actually been wondering that from the start. If when I first saw the tank, if that because I had known that you did installation and service. You're there in Los Angeles, if I'm not
I
mistaken, right?
am.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool, cool. So yeah, I can imagine the inquiries that you get to do, because Discus Planet Tank is one of those. It's like a holy grail style, and
for
even
sure.
people may not even know. They may not know discus or plants, but they know this Discus Planet Tank somehow. They may not be. They're
Yeah.
an expert in neither one, but the idea of the two of them together is something that everybody seems attracted to. So that's very cool.
Yeah, when
Um,
I'm doing my consultations with some clients, like at the very first start, I actually hesitant to show the grotto, although it's like like a crown jewel of my portfolio, or whatever. But it just so that like the clients don't get attached to the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna have this kind of fish, and then they marry
right,
to the idea, and then
right.
you have to talk to them out of it. It's like just a
Because it's
disappointment, or like a letdown.
right. That's interesting to know. I don't know that I've ever interfaced with someone else who does installation and service anyway that has that same takeaway, that it's challenging and not really a business model actually to do an
Yeah.
aquarium like that for a client just because of the demands, the daily eye that it requires.
Yeah, the owner has to be very hands-on, and also that the maintenance required for a tank like that is just a lot.
It is. It is because the two are really, and I often tell people this, that the two are not especially compatible in from a maybe a practicality sense. Not that the fish will do just fine and the plants can do just fine to get. It's not so much that, it's just that what's required from the hobbyist is long term takes a level of dedication that I've just found many
Absolutely.
people either or they get into problems because they didn't make the commitment. Now, I have seen these scenarios where, and this, where things just fall into place, and it's actually strangely not as challenging as you thought it would be, and you're kind of getting away with something, and you just go, "Well, this is cool. I'm going to ride the wave as long as I can." The problem with that, obviously, as you probably experienced, and why you hedge on offering it as a service product, is that that is not a predictable outcome, a thing where
No.
everything kind of just goes well and you're like, oh, wow, I'm not doing as much water changes as I thought. The fish are very healthy. They haven't had intestinal parasites and problems and all these kinds of things. So and I always say that that's not a predictable
Yeah,
outcome.
you can't
So
replicate that.
right,
It's like a luck type of thing that
right,
you don't know. So I didn't get the grotto to be like a successful setup on the first go. It took a lot of adjustments and a lot of learning, a ton of learning, especially on the husbandry and like the water chemistry and all that. So
yeah,
even now, I mean, like I haven't perfected it to the point where I can replicate it anywhere, right? So that's why I'm hesitant on recommending it or like having a setup for my clients, right? But then
sure,
once I get there where I can like have a system replicable, then yeah, obviously I've done it, right? I've done like the like all that that's required of me to know how to keep this perfectly. But uh I feel like the sourcing, right? The sourcing of the fish to have a batch of like very healthy fish from the get go is like more than half of the battle. Because
sure,
yeah, like just I had some red spotted grains at first, so I had like a batch of 10, and then they were doing pretty okay. I dealt with some parasitic issues right from the start, but then metronidazole were able to just kind of get rid of that. But then as I had a little bit of success, I'm like, all right, so let me test out some other strains, right? And then I'm like, oh, I would really want like a royal or like a semi-royal, whatever. And then I actually like traded my a couple of my fish for a semi royal from a friend, and since he's a friend and he seemed to have like all this success with his keeping, no quarantine, and then I just like straight into the tank, and guess what? I still have a bacterial problem today.
right, right. Is that something that are you doing ongoing or periodic, kind of preventative treatments for things like that? Do you take that approach?
Yeah, I discovered that I have to like where I want to do preventative treatments from time to time. So one of the treatment that I do on a monthly basis, so like once a month, is the PP, right? Potassium permanganate
Potassium
treatment.
permanganate.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, so I do that once a month. Although I have like a pretty powerful UV in the
That's good.
filtration, it's just the bacteria count still goes up after a while, and then you can tell with the fish, right? Some of them start like, for example, like my alpha would turn really dark all of a sudden, and then you'd be like, what is going on? So that is like an indication where something's up, so you want to kind of like do a preventative treatment right there.
That speaks to that daily eye, because
Yeah,
catching that straight away and having that intuition about it is just everything for long term success. I've
absolutely.
definitely agree with you
I do
there.
feel like they are moody fish too, right? Because like they
Yeah.
change color a lot, and then
Mhm.
um I feel like so I have some fish that are super stable, right? Some of them after like I quarantine, and then as soon as they go into the tank, they never once go black, and then like the color and patterns just always on point, right? Which I find really odd
Right.
because these fish, like they want to sometimes they want to shy away from like spotlights, right? Like they want to blend into the background, and then going dark and being like quote unquote moody is pretty natural actually, right?
Sure.
As long as they're like hunting down their food when at feeding time, and then kind of like being very active and coming in and out of like their different shades of colors, then it's quite all right. Yeah, like I don't find that to be alarming or anything, but then yeah, like these staple fish are just so cool to have, and then they're just I don't know why, but it could just be a individual trade type of thing. Yeah.
Right. Do you see have you had any problems with this? kind of hierarchy thing that emerges where, yeah, you've got the alpha on down to what we could just call the runt, or definitely the least dominant fish, and even and then you have just a clear chain of command going on where you've got the big alpha, you've probably got its mate, and then you've kind of got everybody else, and then there's the runt. I'm just curious
Hmm.
because I've experienced this so many times. I'm just curious if you
Yeah.
are too. Less so with wilds. I see this more with the domestic fish, with the
Okay.
hybrids, but I have seen it with the wilds where there's always one guy, and he may be eating, he or she may be eating and active, but they're dark, they're losing weight, the
I
eyes are
observed the
starting
same thing.
to bulge out. And if you were to just remove that fish and try and rehab it in another aquarium or whatever, remove it from the group,
It goes to a different fish. The
goes to
next one.
the next one up. Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm
I
always
observed that.
curious if
Yeah.
that's everyone else experiences that same thing. Not a
I
ton of
I also observed that. Yeah.
Okay, so it's something, I don't spend a ton of time anymore on on the different Facebook groups and discussion groups and this kind of thing, engaging with discus keepers, but I found it was a thing that was not always noted or talked about. But I think some of that could be because a lot of the conversation around keeping discus was based on more of the breeder, the collector, or the person that has them more isolated, perhaps. Because you see
Hmm.
the breeding operation, they're in usually bare bottom tanks, probably a
Yep.
sponge filter, spawning cone, this kind of stuff. And so a lot of the conversation's been around scenarios where we don't have them in big groups, and we're not observing their behavior in that total group dynamic, which
Exactly.
is
And most of keepers keep them in like a fairly medium size to small tank, right? Like they don't have like a really large setup where, a group, a significant or, like considerable number are in a group that can more or less simulate their natural behavior,
right. And
so to speak.
I'm guessing that sort of hierarchy situation is something that would be fairly natural to how they occur in the wild. But like I say, I've seen it strangely. I've observed it less so with the hybrid fish. I don't, or I've less so with wild fish. I mean to say,
Hmm.
though it's there, but it's almost as if that behavior's been exaggerated somehow with the
Hmm.
hybrid discus, just from observation, which is kind of
Interesting.
a it's kind of a bummer because you can have a group and everything else otherwise doing very, very well. And if that alpha decides to get too alpha, you know, and that can happen way down the road too. Sometimes the dynamics will just shift, maybe just after a water change or almost out of the blue, and you'll have all of a sudden, or when they decide to pair up and spawn, you'll
Hmm.
get
Yep.
that pair in the corner, and they've just got everybody else backed off, dark,
Yeah, they take
intimidated.
up like 80% of the tank, and the
That's
rest of the
right.
group takes up
Yeah.
like 20.
Have you had any of that dynamic emerge in your setup with the pairing and then
Not
the
really. I haven't really seen any spawning behavior from my discus, and I think that's due to maybe the lack of live food, right? So
sure.
yeah, and then because I just been doing dry food,
Okay, good
most,
though. I think
yeah,
I'm a
just
proponent of that.
to
If you
just to avoid the potential problem that it could carry. And
right,
then I'm personally less interested in the breeding and spawning
sure.
behavior anyhow. So it's cool for me to observe, and I love seeing that. But then it's just like it's not like a goal for me, right?
And I
To
don't
have
I
that.
think it's if you have a group situation in an aquarium that is there for uh decorative design, enjoyment of the total underwater scene. Unfortunately, with a group of discus, it leads to a lot of stress for the other fish other than the pair.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I've I've had situations where the last discus planet tank that I attempted was just last year, and I say attempted because I did throw in the towel. Probably
Okay.
I might have bailed on it too early, but I've done it enough times to kind of see the writing on the wall. But
Mm.
I had and it was hybrid fish, but I had three pairs going at once.
Mm.
So that was a total of six of the 10 fish I had in there were all spawning simultaneously, all
Oh wow.
fighting, each of the pairs sort of fighting with each other for space and it was
Mm.
just it was just it was really chaotic.
How big was
Um,
the tank?
the tank was a 180 centimeters, so approximately
Okay,
180 gallons. So
gotcha.
in my view, not big enough. And I
Yeah.
knew it going in. I said, well, let me. I'm going to try it. I'm going to work with smaller fish, kind of what I call a kind of an adolescent size fish, that kind of
Okay.
3-ish, 4-inch sort of fish. Well, what ended up happening was I got sent adults, like huge, and it was just a miscommunication in the
Okay.
ordering, and so these were really large fish that were just a little cramped in that layout
Mm.
anyway. So it was already a little going off the rails, but it was literally three sets of. I mean, they were content enough to be pairing up, and there was three batches of eggs in three different locations in the
Wow.
aquarium,
That is so
which was
cool though.
it was cool, except one, it was the first thing you see when you walk in the door at
Mhm.
the gallery, the aquarium design store. Uh, and that becomes too high traffic, and even kids coming in,
Mm.
this guy, very unpractical for that situation too,
Got it.
which, despite the stress that you would think the fish would have from all the activity, they were still spawning, etc. But then they got very skittish. Anyway, it was just a
Mm.
problem ongoing. But
Gotcha,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, it's something that you is cool for a minute, but in the group dynamic, actually, the spawning can be something that creates a little chaos down the line there with the group. And though I do see, I experience the same with wilds, less tendency to pair up and spawn, probably just because it's a wild fish and they're going to be more in tune with uh,
Yeah, the seasonal
the
change.
natural rhythms of nature
Yeah.
that would make them induce spawning, unlike the hybrid fish that are generations, 100 generations deep, spawning in a bare bottom aquarium with a sponge filter in the
Yeah.
corner, right?
Yeah.
So, what are you feeding primarily? That's always a big question people have.
Yeah, I feed them tropical fish food, right? So like they have a couple of product that I'm doing feeding them right now, like the different type of granules and then the flakes. So I find this one particular product from them very enticing to the fish. It's the soft granules, and
Okay.
then yeah, the soft granules they really go after those, and then
Wow.
even the pickier ones. So I think is mm, maybe the texture of the food, and then just how oily it is. It could be
Sure.
that, and then that the fish like find it very palatable. There's like a very like a specific granule that's made for wild discus that has a lot of fruit ingredients, right? So like in the wild they chew or like eat on like rotten or overripe fruit, right? That's floating on top of the surface and whatnot. So I think that's a pretty good um, I guess variety of nutrients that they
Sure.
can intake, and that's been keeping them pretty healthy. And then also I'm feeding this one new food that's called Legit. Have you
Oh,
heard of it?
legit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Dobie's
So
stuff. Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah, yeah,
big.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
We feed it too. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
yeah,
It's a
and the
good food.
discus really like that as well. So I'm
Okay.
just trying to diversify some of these different type of food that they can get on a daily basis.
Sure. And I'm sure you find that, and it's such a normal thing to, you want them to eat so bad that I don't, discus eating is one of the most fulfilling aquarium experiences to me. Like, just, I don't know, just because maybe I have a sense that they might be challenging, or they can be finicky. And there's just such a feeling of satisfaction to see
I have
discus.
to concur. Yeah, it's um seeing them eat is very different from seeing other fish eat, because just
Right.
because you don't want to see them not eat, right? And
Right.
then and that happens
Right.
from time to time, and that is like the sense of just the sense of relief that they're eating
Right.
well. It's like, all right,
It's
they're pretty healthy. Yeah, so that just that alone is very satisfying. And then I used to, for a while, I used to feed them live black worms, and
right.
then they turn into just little piranhas, like go after the worms like very viciously, and then not the the usual type of like just grazing on the
Right.
bottom whatnot. Yeah, they like hunter mode, and that's pretty cool to see as well. And it's just like you realize, oh, they're actually pretty powerful fish, right? Like the whole body is like a disc of muscle, and then it's just like
True.
dash to get the worms and stuff. Yeah.
Did you have any problems having fed them blackworms with them getting spoiled and not wanting to eat dry
Oh,
food?
that's why that's the main reason why I stopped, and
Yeah,
also the disease prevention aspect of it. But then
sure.
yeah, like once they get fed with blackworm like a few times, then they're like they'll lose interest in other food
Right.
quite a bit. But then that's not to say that they will just stop eating other food completely. And then they do some of them do lose interest, and then it's pretty hard for them to come back to eating dry food again. But it depends on the fish as well, and it depends on the fish health. So super healthy discus will be pretty, actually not picky in terms of eating.
Good
They'll
point.
pretty much eat whatever you offer if they're very healthy. The ones that, like, it depends on the personality as well. Like a fish might be healthy, but then they just are a little more picky on the food. Then like once they taste the worm, they're like, no, I'm not going back to the dry food.
Sure.
So that could happen too. Yeah.
It's good to hear you haven't gotten them spoiled or yourself spoiled on feeding uh, bloodworms, frozen bloodworms. I think Hikari frozen bloodworms is just one of those long withstanding go-to foods that I think long term can be problematic. I don't
I
just from observation.
Yeah, I tried to mix in some of the frozen food every once in a while, right? Because they do need it. But then the thing I find is that like every time I do, it could be, this is like pretty unfounded, right? Like it's just from like my observation or like my suspicion, right? Like
Yeah.
every time I feed frozen food, right, and then right after I'll see some problem with the fish. Like they will be doing pretty good, and I'm like pretty confident. I'm like, all right, I think they need some frozen food. Try some frozen food. Something happens, like the fish will go dark, or like some like their body, like they'll sometimes they have pimples, right, and then a pimple will pop up, and then it's just I'm like, nah, it's not worth it. Like these dry food like seem to be doing pretty good job like so
Yeah.
far. So uh like we always want to like have them be even healthier, right? Like I'm like,
Yes.
it's not enough. Like let's be even healthier. So yeah, it's just during those times that like kind of I got discouraged from trying frozen food. So we'll see. I'll keep trying, but until I find the right one, I'll just be very sparse with the frozen food feeding. Yeah.
Is as far as that primary softer granule that you were referring to, and you made a very I think often overlooked observation about uh, them grazing on the fruits and this kind of thing in the wild. Um, is that a brand of food that you would care to share with us
Oh
in
yeah,
particular?
it's called Tropical. The brand is called
Oh,
Tropical.
okay, cool. Tropical brand, and this is just a. Is it a discus specific marketing
No,
on the?
they're a huge brand in Europe, and then
Okay,
yeah, only I think only Fish Gallery carries them. I mean, like I think some other stores will carry them too, but then Fish Gallery is the main distributor for the U.S.
oh,
for them.
okay, okay, got it. They're actually distributed for it. didn't know. They're right here in my own backyard. I should probably
Yeah.
get get in on that. So it sounds like a great food, and I think anything that obviously gives a nod to more of the natural diet, which discus, because I think of the bloodworm situation over the decades
Yeah.
now, there's
Yeah.
a notion that a more protein diet is sort of foundational to discus, and what I've always heard is that they're quite the grazers and reasonably omnivorous. And if you look at the size of their mouth, a carnivore, it doesn't make any sense, right? They have a
Doesn't
mouth
make sense at all.
and a
And
stomach.
in the
This
wild, like you struggle to kind of like even imagine how they will get so much protein, right, in
Right,
their natural diet. I mean, like, yes, from maybe worms, right, in the water, and then insect larvae. But yeah, they're just not the type of fish that, to me, would, like, hunt down like a lot of protein intake. And then plus, like, when from the dissection, or like autopsy of like these wild fish, right? Like, they do find all kinds of stuff, and most of their gut content is actually just detritus.
right.
Yeah,
Very
so yeah, they
just the
graze a
opposite of
lot.
what we would think, exactly,
Yeah,
because
so they
we're
just graze a lot, and then like there's some fruit contents, and definitely there's some protein contents as well. But then, I just think like the reason why we resort to like these high protein diet for these guys is, you know um early in the days when they were trying to keep these fish alive, they just basically were throwing everything at them to see what sticks. And it just so
right,
happens, the high protein diet kind of sticked, and then proved to be, rather successful than like than natural, right? And then,
right,
yeah, to replicate their natural diet is going to be very difficult.
sure,
So
yeah, because
yeah.
it kind of goes against our notion of the high water quality, the environment where we could have biofilms and detritus in an
Yeah.
aquarium obviously could speak to a little bit of, it's an interesting point. And as I go in any kind of exploration or research year after year after year about discus in an aquarium, all these little subtleties emerge as to what makes them or what gives them a notion of being challenging. And because sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't, and I've just seen it all in
Oh
different
yeah.
different setups and different people's layouts and stuff. So, but I think a lot of it is, yeah, it's a fish that evolved with there is a lot of nuance in its natural environment, and it seems that like pristine water quality and lots of detritus, these are at odds with one another. So it becomes a challenging
Yeah.
thing to kind of crack the code on that balance of what they're going to want in an aquarium.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think so in their natural body of water, there's a lot of tannin, and then there's a lot of tannic acid and all that organic um, substance in the water that is a natural antibody, right? And then or antibacterial for these fish, and then just the volume that's moving in their natural setting would kind of prevent them from getting bacterial infections, right?
right,
But then in our home aquaria, unless you're actively adding these tannins and then adding these substance, they just don't have that. Like, they just don't have the antibacterial, I guess, element, right, in the water. And then, so with that said, you really want to control your bacterial counts. And then, yeah, like keeping these wild discs is like sometimes a little discouraging, just because you're like, oh man, like I thought I figured it out, but no, well, there's something else, right? And then Sumer, like he visited like you guys
yep, oh yeah, yeah,
a couple days ago. Yeah. So he I saw a post like story on Instagram of his, right? And that he was saying that like, oh, like he took a vacation, and then when he come back, he had to deal with all these issues with the discus, right? Like, to me, I was like, okay, great, because these guys are like still having problems. So like, it made me feel a little better. about my own fish discus keeping. Yeah, so it just goes to show that these guys, the discus are not fish that are just um, you're able to automate everything. You have
Right.
to be very hands on. Yeah.
Right. And even like you say, that's a great point. And I think it's a good point to emphasize for people who feel like when they see these fluctuations in color and temperament and all this, that it's not you, it's not anything you did wrong. It's not, that this is part of the deal. And that's nothing to blame yourself about, necessarily, because I've
Right.
seen a lot of that too. I've suffered that, thinking that it was some kind of neglect on my part, or um and I think that the psychological side
Yeah,
of it might be more the reason that makes them challenging than the actual challenges of the fish themselves.
I
Is
agree. I
how
agree.
you
Yeah.
process the challenge. Yeah.
But I do think that, if we can even keep corals, right? If we can even keep coral reef and like have, all kinds of chemistry, water chemistry down to like the science, right? Then there's not a whole lot of reason why, like, there's like there can be a very systematic approach to discus keeping. But at the same time, like coral is like a huge industry that, like a lot of money went into it in terms of research and all that, right? Like in terms of like, innovation in equipment and all the science behind it. So I guess there's just not that much money going into discus research and whatnot. So
Good
that's why
point.
we don't have it. So I'm pretty sure there's a way to perfect it, right? And then have like a very successful, like a almost like a kit, right? That you just have like all the water chemistry and the minerals needed for them to dial down to the T, and then you just dose accordingly, and you will have like a good result. I think that shouldn't be like impossible at all, and then it's just, yeah, a matter of um investment.
Maybe that's something. Maybe that's something you and I could potentially collaborate on in some kind of way, because uh, you've definitely gained a lot of unique insights, and I think you've got a very similar approach in that you go a lot on your just observation and that kind of experience you get from looking at the aquarium in a certain kind of way. And so, because way back in 2003, I did really my first serious discus planted tank, and it was for a client who
Hmm.
it was, this was ADG is like 3 years old at this point, and we're just ambitious and going to try
Yeah,
anything.
no fear.
No zero, and so I devised what I felt like. I felt pretty strongly that I had a formula in terms of the layout style that could really possibly be something replicatable or scalable, or like a core formula for a discus planted tank specifically. Um, and so, very willing, very patient client, and large aquarium. It was 375 gallons, so it was,
Good
and there
size.
was only going to be, I think, 8 fish in there total. It wasn't a
Mm.
huge group, this kind of thing. So anyway, the the formula, and I've done it to this day, and it seems to work in terms of a layout or compositional formula. I'm curious your thoughts on it. And so definitely large. Let's just say larger aquarium with fewer fish is kind of a thing. Um, but as far as plants, I would choose exclusively Echinodoris, because one, we could uh, they would grow well without a soil substrate. They're pretty happy in just an inert type of material. That aquarium used just fluorite, Seachem fluorite back in the day.
Hmm.
So I was sticking with the Echinodoris because, of course, they're going to present well in a large aquarium, and they're going to give a sort of, if the fish do want to scatter or get spooked and want to retreat into the plants, there's kind of that thicker, that dense leaf coverage. They can get back
Hmm.
in between them very easily. Um, so that there was sort of that element to the plants.
Yeah.
Furthermore, I found Echinodoris to be much warmer water tolerant
Mm.
So it's just especially if you, let's say, do mostly Amazon sword, which is just, a classic, very hardy, difficult plant to actually kill.
Right.
It may not grow like you want it to, but it's not going to die and melt very easily. So you're using that, and then you're kind of texturing that with other Echinodoris species. Um, and so they're handling the warmer water, which is something else we can deal with as kind of just a side note on the temperature question, because I do find most aquatic plants do better, let's just say, in cooler water. They really don't
Mm.
want the water heated, which is one of the reasons why discus and plants can be somewhat at odds, especially if you get into a lot of mosses and these plants that really, again, won't die in warm water but aren't big fans of it.
Hmm.
Not going to give you the kind of idealized growth you're seeking. So
Yeah.
for those reasons, I was choosing just Echinodoris. Uh, More minimal on the hardscape. Definitely nothing with fine branches or too many points, that kind of thing, just
Mm.
to avoid scratching, etc.
Yeah.
So more open, but using the Echinodoris for kind of the density in the background. And that would allow me to have an open foreground, definitely a sand or open foreground. Because in this way, too, as you know, they'll like to graze on the bottom. I mean,
Hmm.
I think you can train fish to discus even to come up, and I've seen yours do it in many clips where they're at the top, they're having a feeding response, etc. But
Yeah.
the the possibility of maybe even in some layouts turning off the filters for feeding and letting the food settle on the bottom and allowing the discus to go down there and kind of blow in the sand and graze on it
Yeah.
like they will. So definitely an open foreground. Open foregrounds can also be cleaned very easily. You can siphon the sand out
Sure.
and replace it even rather. So, and when you siphon foreground or cosmetic sand from a planted tank, even if it looks fairly clean, I'm sure you've seen this. You get it in the bucket, that water is really dirty. It's filthy. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very much a dirt trap that being able to, keep that turned over and removed as opposed to having, I'm sure you see these layouts of discus planted tanks on YouTube and whatnot. And they've got a full carpet in the front, and a lot of things. I'm kind of going, not sure how that's going to do long term. But
Mm.
um, so the open foreground again, Echinodoris, more minimal on the hardscape or just avoiding potentially scratching surfaces. Open foreground was something that I kind of developed, and I felt like it was sort of a formula. I even had named that aquarium, which was entered in the ADA contest back in
Oh
2003 or
yeah.
four,
Cool.
whatever. I called it Heiko's Lesson because I was trying to create conditions super favorable to discus. Um,
Mm.
and so Heiko, he really signed off on it. He actually featured it in his one of his discus books.
Mm.
At one point, and then the layout did well that year. This is a long time ago. It would absolutely flop today, I'm sure, but in the ADA contest, and so and then in the coming years, I was able to meet Mr. Amano, be ADA distributor, et cetera. So had the unique privilege of Mr. Amano telling me himself that he was like, now wait a minute, you've got a real formula for discus planted tank here. Um,
Mm.
that again was for me the I wanted because well I had already tried a client installation um,
Mm.
in a law firm in downtown Houston. In this is on the 52nd floor of a big downtown skyscraper.
Yep.
This was an 600-gallon aquarium that divided their two big conference rooms, and so
Mm.
it was just being viewed all the time. I mean, and the demands
Nice.
to keep it really pristine were extreme, and that's where I
For
really
sure.
learned like that kind of aquarium was not super practical for
Yeah.
client installation because I would spend
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
special security access on weekends to get into bill. I'd be there for 8 hours on a Saturday,
Wow.
because I had used so many. Um, it was densely planted, though no foreground, but I had a lot of crypts. I had a lot of different huge, I just call them pom poms of like Windelov, Java fern, and Anubias, and plants that one were trapping a lot of debris over time, which swords really won't do. If you get a big mound of Java fern over a long period of time, you get your hand and wave it around in there pretty good. And
Oh yeah.
if you're in a big tank, if your flow's not right, there's a lot of junk coming out of there, right?
Oh yeah.
So, and then I found that Java ferns too, while they'll tolerate warmer water like the discus tended to want, um, they don't love it. In other words, you tend to get a little, I call it crunchy. They get kind of a crunchy look to them. They're not just that kind of vibrant green, sort of pristine thing I was going for. And I was always struggling with that. And so that's what kind of gave me the idea to go with the Echinodoros model, which the overwhelming majority are from, Central South America anyway. So there's a little bit of a nod to not using Southeast Asian species, but
Hmm.
sticking with the. So anyway, I think it could be so cool to do some kind of collaborative formula development or something that, because you've mentioned several things that I've been like, wow, okay, I hadn't thought of that, or you're onto some great foods and you have a real deep understanding of that element. Um, but something that gives people a real template or a formula that tends to up their likelihood of success with it. Anyway, I didn't mean to be long winded about that,
Oh no,
but
no, no worries. Yeah, it's very
but
cool to hear the insight.
yeah, and it's something that goes way back that I've had done many times since then, and at least as far as that core formula, it's always worked, but it's more the natural behaviors of the fish that became, oh, I don't know if I'd call it issues, but if there was something I would call an issue, it was, the
Hmm.
hierarchy, the spawning behaviors. It was really the result of the fish becoming quite happy in the
Yeah.
layout, and then and then variables emerging that created an issue unto themselves. Many of which I feel like you've kind of got getting a handle
Oh,
on some of that.
Heiko's given me a lot of grief about having the tank uh viewable from two sides, right? Like the grotto is a room divider, and then he's like, no, you gotta have one viewing only, and then yeah, he gave me a lot of grief on that, but then um he definitely knows his stuff, and then I think like an ideal situation where like if you are absolutely just gunning for discus, right, and then especially wild discus, and then like the setup is entirely devoted for just that, then absolutely you want to have like just one viewing, and then have like what basically what you just mentioned, right, having like a place of refuge, I guess, that they can like go high into, and then the hardscapes. I do find the hardscapes could be that's debatable. I feel like in my opinion, just because yes, they would hurt themselves if they like start like being skittish and dashing every which direction. However, if they, I mean, like in my experience with my discus, like the only time they will be skittish and just like freak out, right, is when they're having a health issue.
Okay,
Yeah, so
I've
when
heard that before. That's a good
yeah,
point.
so when
Yeah.
they're having a health issue, especially when the water is not right, like I had a mini ammonia spike this one time, and then in like right away, like they become like super skittish, and then
Okay.
so yeah, like besides that, like my daughter, she's 6 now, but then I had the tank for like 3 years, so she's go up and bang on the glass, and the fish don't even they're not even phased. Um, so in terms of like the hardscape, I feel like if you have a not the entire tank obviously, but like one place where you have some dense branches and like fine branches and whatnot, it can actually provide that sense of the refuge more like even more so for these guys when they know that okay, that's the place they'll retrieve to when
Sure.
they don't feel comfortable and whatnot. But then yes, they would have the risk of getting scratched, and yeah, but then I feel like a little scratch here and there is not like a huge deal. Obviously, that's my just personal
No, I'm
opinion.
with you on that. As far as if you look at where a lot of them, when I've seen natural habitats and biotopes and stuff, there can be some very dense,
Yep.
tangles of wood and things like that. That's definitely
Yep.
not an open occasion.
Yep.
So I
And
and
yeah,
their
especially
shape,
yeah,
their
especially
shape is
when they're basically in the wild, and then a lot of times they will be resting or just actively residing on along the banks, right? Like near the banks of a river or of a lake, and then these banks have fallen trees, have roots coming into the water, and then not a whole lot of vegetation actually, right? So they would just kind of like in between, like just hang out in between
yeah,
the branches. And then sometimes, like, there's another thing about discus that, like, most people would think that they're a very calm water fish, right? Like they can't deal with currents and whatnot. But then that's actually not true too, because they're so widely distributed, in the whole region. So some regions have very calm water, they do fine. Some regions have, quite a bit of current, and they're also
yeah.
fine. So they're very versatile and tough fish.
And if you look at their shape too, I mean, it's definitely very function specific, obviously, as all things in nature tend to be. But
Mhm.
um, if I reflect on that, I could see where that kind of that narrow, broad but narrow shape, not unlike angelfish, perhaps too, that the ability to kind of get in between tight spaces of wood tangles and things like that is probably quite natural for them. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good point in
Yeah,
terms of
especially during the spawning season, right? Because like they spawn in the high water, and then like basically the top portion of the river is just branches, right? Trees,
right,
right? Trees with tons of foliage, and then they have to get into the crevices of like branches, and like they want like a secure spawn site, so they really start finding the tightest crevice to go through, and then that's where their body really just kind of like take advantage of, that type of setting, right? And then yeah, so I feel like they'd be okay living around some semi dense
sure.
hardscape.
No, it's a good point. It actually, yeah, that gives me kind of a reflection on modifying that approach a little bit more. And, so I would tend to choose more kind of the bigger trunk kind of type pieces, the thicker bodied pieces. But perhaps even a little more density in the hardscape would benefit them. But on temperature, what's your approach or philosophy on temperature, and and
um
and do you see any
yeah.
issues with plants being in warmer water if you're keeping the water warmer?
Right. So the grotto is around 83. So
Okay,
I
pretty warm.
do a little variation between 83 to 82. So um, the plants definitely, I gradually adapted the plant to that high temperature. So I had it when I just set up the tank. I had it at like 75 or so, and then over a month time, I gradually turned the heat up, right? And then they most of them adapted okay, right? So like I have like tons of java ferns in there, like narrow leaf java ferns, and then anubias are doing great. um but I do find that just moss just can't do it. Moss
Right.
just can't deal with the high
Yeah.
temperature. And
Yeah.
then uh although I do have like terrestrial moss on like some of the wood that comes out of the water,
Sure. There you go. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they, they do okay because they're
Yeah.
not in the water. And
Right.
then booze just cannot deal with like
Yeah.
high temperature at all. So I am actually thinking about, like, I've been thinking about rescaping the grotto for a long time. It's
Hmm.
just like with the whole logistics, and like, have
Sure.
to, like, it's a huge planning. So I haven't got to it, but then I want to actually try to see if I can do some type of carpeting, like not like carpeting in the aquascaping sense, right? Like the
Sure.
traditional aquascaping sense, but more like maybe some growth of dwarf sedge on the bottom, so you can have like a bottom that have some vegetations popping up instead of just, like sand, or um I use slate, right? I use slate stone or flagstone for my bottom, right? And then I try to seal them, like, so there's not like detritus that's gonna go under. Yeah, so that like I feel like that can reach pretty good success, because you create this bottom where it's very natural, right? Like a lot of
Mm,
the river settings, and then if you go see the bottom, it's not just sand, right? Like you have like rocks, layers of rocks popping up, and then there's sand, and then
okay.
there's some more rocks. So a parts of it, like if you like stack the, the flagstone, or um, slate stone pretty well, and then have that exposed, right, in part, and then have like, light sand, or like just a thin layer of sand covering the rest, whatnot. That creates like a pretty cool visual effect.
I like it.
And I'm thinking, oh, maybe I can, like, on top of that, I can, sparsely have some dwarf sedge just covering, parts of it, and then it's not like a long type of situation, right?
Right.
So that type of thing, like, I'm trying to see if I can actually do. And I just don't like, do you use CO2 injection in your discus tanks?
Yes, I always have. I don't think I've ever
Okay.
done it without.
Right, because the
Yeah.
plants need it.
Right.
So I've heard that, discus are not like, they don't do well in CO2 settings.
I
Like
can.
I
I
heard that
can.
from Heiko actually.
I
But
can see
like, do
that.
you?
I can see
Oh,
that.
okay.
I
Oh,
mean, as
really?
far as I think that may be why because you brought up a good point about they really shouldn't be spooking or skittish too much when they're happy, when they're, and it can be something health related that's causing that. And I would say that not every time, but often I observed more of that skittish behavior or tendency. Now, of course, they would still have a big time feeding response because they were not, it wasn't that extreme, but it was one more thing that was giving them an odd behavior. So you'd come to the aquarium and they would still practically come eat out of my hand over time, etc. But the wrong kind of entering the room in the wrong kind of way, or certain
Yeah.
other people, they would just walk up to the aquarium for no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
without being brushing up on it or anything, not tapping glass, and they would really freak out.
Yeah.
And that could that does give me again just more reflection on perhaps the CO2 is just adding a chemistry variable that they're not crazy about. I could totally see that.
Mm.
Makes
So
some sense.
yeah, so I'm not using CO2 on the
Okay.
grotto.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why, like, all the ferns and everything, they pretty
Sure.
much stay like that size. Like they reach a good size, and then they just kind of stop growing, right?
Yes.
Except for the narrow leaf, kind of like they're still multiplying, but then just the other ones, they're like very slowly growing, but then they're healthy at the same time. They're just, like, very very green. It's just
Right.
they don't like explode in their growth. Yeah.
Which, yeah, you wouldn't even want. Like that's actually
Yeah.
helpful. That's helpful that they're not
Yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah.
not
Because that
overgrowing.
tank is so tall that, like, I see Oliver not like, he has all these special tools, right? Like the really long
Yeah.
scissors and whatnot. Like for his large tanks, I'm like, man, I have to get some of those like really cool
Yes.
long tools
And
to do
Oliver's an
something.
interesting guy that you mentioned, Oliver, because he's obviously done over the many years now. He's got a couple of decades under his belt of very large scale,
Mm-hmm.
heavily planted discus
Mm.
aquariums. And
Yep.
so a lot of people that would come, from a customer or client level would have seen his videos. And
Right.
so
So they
what's
reference
in
his work. Yeah.
yeah, what's in their head is his work. And I had always thought that a huge advantage that he's had in the, because sometimes there's a lot of fish. I mean, he's done some where like they are, it is packed with. I mean, there looks like there's 50 or more fish in the
Yeah,
tank.
I know what you're talking about.
But I think there could be something there in two variables. One, the huge volume of the tank. I mean, these are just big aquariums. These are 5,000 6,000 gallon, aquariums that then have huge groups. That I think the large group like that, because when I've talked to him about it, he doesn't experience nearly as much of this hierarchical situation because there's probably just
Mm,
there's so many fish in there,
yeah,
and
just a number,
he would
the
have the
sheer
video of
number.
him feeding, and every single one of those fish is having a feeding response. It's not like there's a clear dominant group or hierarchy situation. So I think bigger numbers could be something, but then obviously bigger numbers in a much larger aquarium.
Hmm.
So, and
Hmm.
that could get us into a better balance point with the amount of plants that we have in there, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, just an interesting
Yeah,
note
so
because
for
Oliver's
his setup, he's definitely injecting CO2, right? Like for his plants. So, it's like,
But the big
I
volume
mean,
of water, I think things in my experience over the years with large aquariums, like you get over about that. I'm picking a number, but maybe 500 gallon range or so.
hmm.
Some of the dynamics shift. I think it's why, like Mr. Amano's tank in his home, which carries on to this day, has always had a just a remarkable stability to it. And I remember seeing it. It's been 10 years ago now, but where in one of its iterations, it even had the entire background was stem plants that they had grown from Wabikusa, Rotalas and
Mm.
Ludwigias, and they were clean all the way from the top of a 5 foot tall aquarium down to the bottom. You didn't what they weren't leggy or any. I mean, in other words, it was something. It was really mind blowing. I mean
Hmm.
but I always attributed that to just the dynamics you get into at the very large scale, um,
Mm.
which could be part of what starts to come together for uh, guys like you and me for at that client installation level. As we if we kind of if we're crafting a formula for greater predictability, um, kind of pulling together all these different areas, Heiko, our own observation and experience, the conventional wisdom out there about discus, looking at guys that get unique opportunities like Oliver Knott to do huge aquariums. Now, kind of pulling all that together to develop something that's actually quite achievable and has as a degree of predictability to it that I think, as we said at the beginning, you and I both have some hesitations about. Um, and then when another note I would say about Oliver's situation is that he is in Germany. And
Yep.
Germany, there's a long history of just a lot of passion for discus, and many of the world's top breeders, at least on the domestic fish side, but on the wild side also, because
Yeah.
years of importing fish, I've learned that Germany, and then maybe secondly maybe Japan, are two markets that, and there's certain fish, wild discus being one of them, that really get a preferential treatment
Mm.
from a lot of the exporters that are, they know that that's an established market and culture for discus, and they can command a much higher price, to be honest. So some of the, like you spoke earlier to the quality of the fish going in, that is a thing that for yourself and me, being in the U.S. with a different set of variables here sometimes, um, we look to what's going on in another part of the world in terms of what they're keeping and the success they're having. And I've always said that that can be a outcome of their specific resources and their variables, which are going to be very different from ours. And that between their water, their experience, the fact that uh, someone like Oliver may have a better occasion to go and get the fish from the importer straight away. They've got the fish in, they've acclimated them specifically for him for a big project, and he's going and getting them from an amazing, very strategic operation for discus, and then taking them straight to his already very well calibrated uh, display or final layout situation for the fish. And some, because I'm looking in awe sometimes at the remarkable health, the numbers that they're able to do together. He did that. He did one not too long ago for a client that was all wilds. I don't know if you caught that one, but
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's a large tank.
very large tank, stunning group of fish. Haven't I don't know if he's circled back on that one and done any content too recently, but I think that one's out. It's in Europe, but outside of Germany. Maybe not one he sees himself personally all that often, but either way, and I say this mostly to markets like the US, where again we're seeing what the whole world is doing and getting inspired by things that, and I tell it to customers wanting these kinds of tanks all the time, that like, well, just remember that YouTube video may have been taking place in a place that's got very different situation than you, different resources, different, just aquarium keeping culture, different water, all these things. So just, it's an important takeaway, and sometimes what we're trying to do, um, I think, in that we're dealing with a different deck of cards here sometimes.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's definitely very reasonable. And I I feel like the way they approach fish keeping in a broad sense is just so different from us
Right.
as well, right? They have like a long tradition of fish keeping, and then um, even the passion that these people have for especially freshwater fish, right? Because like we have a huge passion for saltwater counterparts in the US, and then which that's really unique to us, right? Like I don't see a huge like any market outside of the US that have like such a dedication for saltwater fish keeping,
Yeah.
or and even reef, right? Anywhere else, but then in Germany, in Japan, I mean now more and more so in China, the passion for freshwater fish is just growing exponentially. And then when you said these exporters and collectors that they favor Germany and Japan, now the number one player is China, because they
True.
just yeah, I mean like they just follow the money, right? And then
Right.
whoever's the highest bidder, they'll just give them the preferential treatment.
Sure.
Yeah, so the environment definitely speaks a lot. And then I do feel like the variety of even fish food, right? For example, like the tropical line, right, that have like all these dedicated food, right, specific for discus, or
Right.
even specific for wild discus, right?
Right.
So they're able to come up with these products. Shows how much dedication they're putting on this one type of fish. And
They're
then
not trying to get
uh,
just another SKU on a PetSmart shelf,
right,
like
yeah.
it's a little bit more of the struggle we have here sometimes.
Right.
Um,
So, and a lot of the science and the scientific rigor that goes into the fish keeping and husbandry for them, it's just very different.
Really good point. Really good point. So I saw too that you were in a recent clip on your Instagram that you were dosing the. I'm pretty sure it was the Brightwell product, but one
Hmm.
his Blackwater extract, I think it was. And so that's something I've never tried or used. Um, I've always attributed those. A Blackwater extract in a plastic bottle in a fish store has been around since I can remember as like a little kid. So
Hmm.
um, what's your do you genuinely feel like that is helping? Is that something you can definitely observationally see a difference in?
I do, I do,
Okay.
yeah.
I was
So,
almost going to say that I don't think it does anything, but I can't, I shouldn't say that because I've never actually used a product like that. So I'm very curious your feedback on that. Did I lose you for a
hey
second
Jeff,
there?
sorry, yeah, are we back?
Yeah, yeah, we're back.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I've observed that. Yeah, especially in their appetite. Yeah. So once I consistently, dose this additive, basically, I find, some of the fish that are not very uh like they don't eat very well start to like accept other food, and then um more of, like, well, I started to really start consistently dosing this after bacterial ordeal, or like
Okay.
bacterial infection with a lot of the fish, and then they start having, like losing scales, and then like one even have like a hole, like hole in the head, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then yeah, it developed like really quickly, and then I was struggling to like course correct, and like get them healthy again. And then I was trying all kinds of stuff, and then yeah, like once I started to at this like a show a lot of improvement in their behavior, and then like the hole in the head start uh actually closing.
Wow.
And then yeah, it's also the type of food that they're eating now, that like I'm getting them a variety of food, so they're probably taking in more vitamins, right? So vitamins are a huge thing
Yeah.
that they need. And then also I'm dosing the another Brightwell product that's called discus code. So it's
Oh yeah.
just trace elements, right?
Yep.
Mainly trace elements. So I'm dosing these two, and yeah, I do see a difference, and then now I'm just sticking with it, right? Like I'm dosing like twice a week. And then I'm even thinking about like if I should use a doser, right? Like just to have that consistent amount
It's a
in
good
the water.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll experience with that, and then I experiment with that, and then report back. But yeah, the product works.
Very cool. Good to know, actually, because I've unfortunately developed such a skepticism or a cynicism about
Oh, for
so many
sure. Yeah.
problems. Though I would say Brightwell, is always been a very research driven, very science based brand.
Right.
And do you know Chris Brightwell yourself by chance? He's
No, I
okay.
don't. It's just
Very very
they.
very impressive guy. Very
Okay. Cool.
very science minded. I mean, I've often joked that the description, the product descriptions when you read the bottles are extensive. I'm like, there's like it's almost intimidating. There's so much information there,
Right.
which I think is great for a kind of a higher level product like that. But
Mm.
yeah, if you were going to be using one, I think you probably picked a good one in terms of something that's going to be really the right tool for the job and not some brown water in a bottle in a fish
Oh
store
yeah,
somewhere,
yeah.
which is
I like actually Sumer recommended to me a long time
okay.
ago. So I mean,
Yeah.
like anything that guy says, like I would just kind of almost trust it blindly.
Yes. Yeah. He was. He like I said he had made a visit to ADG just a couple weeks ago, and we have a display with that we're growing out some Altum angels in the big center
Mm.
display in the gallery
Yeah, yeah,
there,
yeah.
and
I see.
and
I've seen that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess he saw the chameleon cats in there that he's actually that he, it's pretty obscure fish in general, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm breeding those.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
his focus right now was just spawning these chameleon cats, which I was like, wow, only Samir would be like deep diving into something tricky like that,
Have you seen his video on like he's using the little brush to help them the fries
I
come out
haven't.
their
I
eggs?
haven't.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, like that video blew up on Instagram. So like he got
Wow.
like
I gotta check it.
millions
Yeah.
of views, and then
It's
yeah,
next level Aquarius for sure.
yeah, it's so cool. I mean, like when he told me about like how, because these fish, like the males carry the eggs, and then like they have a mustache essentially,
That's
like
right. Yeah.
what looks like a mustache, and then they carry all the eggs on their mustache, and then since like they burrow in sand and everything, so the sand is very abrasive, right? So the egg has to be extra thick, so the fry actually can come out on their own without the sand rubbing and whatever. So
Yeah.
in a breeding environment where he's basically stripping the eggs and then having them in an incubator, he has to be the one that
Wow.
peels off the eggshell so the
Wow.
fries can come out. It's so interesting. Yeah.
Have you ever looked at, or tried or thought about doing discus in a hardscape only situation? The reason I ask is because we actually do have a few client installations right now that are very successful,
Mm-hmm.
at least in terms of just long term discus health. This year, not all, and I mean, I've not too long ago, I had posted a video of one client that's got wild discus in a hardscape, um, and so which he's had his share of struggles too. He's fortunately
Mm.
very dedicated. He's the right kind of client to do it,
Yeah.
but mostly we have worked with more the domestic fish. But does is that something that, because it's controversial in the sense that I get a lot of, I think it's kind of unfounded pushback. I think it's mostly because people want to see the green in there, but I'm not totally convinced that it's that much of an asset for the discus themselves in particular. It may not matter one way or the other. It could be a benefit. I can't say conclusively that, some Java fern and some Anubias and whatnot growing in there. We could arguably even say Southeast Asian origin plants in a South American fishes environment, well, all that. But that aside, do you have any thoughts on that approach? Because I can say we've had a lot more predictability by having fish in the hardscape only setting. We actually have a dedicated technician. He's been with us
Mm-hmm.
for, I've lost track. He's been with us for a very long time. His name's Jared Kirby. He's pretty active poster on Instagram and stuff too. And this guy's just he knows way more about fish in general and their environments and breeding and all this than certainly than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And he just rolls his eyes every time he sees me attempting another discus planted tank, and he just says, those fish need to be in a hardscape. Um, and that's just from a guy who's out there week in and week out maintaining some,
Mm-hmm.
impressive large scale discus hardscapes in client homes where
Why,
obviously
why, why did you say that?
um, he just feels like it's variable control, I think, more than
Mm.
anything. The ability to do just there's no regard the for well-being of plants, which in your case, I think you've made a very wise decision. You've taken a very thoughtful approach in no CO2, I think is I think that's a I think you're on to something there and skipping the CO2. And then two, choosing plants that are just going to have a more measured growth, not likely to get out of control, this kind of
Mhm.
thing. Um, so I don't think there's a there with especially with the way you're doing it, but I think it's mostly a variable control. I think it's an ability to feed more heavily, more freely. Um, but some of that too could come from our expectation. It's why it's kind of an interesting question to me, because I think it may come from our expectation of the lush plant growth, and like if we're going to have plants in there, we want a certain impact from the plants too. Um, and we're often not patient enough with the no CO2 setups and things like that. So it's his saying that they're better in a hardscape could just speak to they're better in that he as a technician can control the variables that much more, and there's no breakdown and just no contribution or need to care for plants
Mhm.
in the layout. And so and we can aerate the water much more heavily than, not that you can't do that in no CO2, but I think being able to have a more highly oxygenated thing, all of that. I don't know. It's something too. I think sometimes the pushback comes because we want to see plants in there so bad, and I agree. They definitely. obviously it adds an element. I had a hardscape, just hardscape with my funny little goldfish tank uh,
Yeah.
here in my office. And man, the minute I just took some mother pot, Anubias, and added them in back behind the rocks, I just keep them in the pots. I don't even take them
Yeah,
out,
sure.
and just kind of, there's no doubt about it, man. It added such a warmth and such a feeling that I totally get it. I treat hardscape, or what we, kind of the hardscape only style, as a style unto itself, and so it's not something I look at and go, well, where's the plants? Or there should be plants in there, which is a normal pushback comment on a post of a hardscape only kind of tank. Uh, and I kind of go, well, no, it's, I mean, that's like saying, well, how come you didn't put the, where's, you're looking at a reef tank going, well, where's the guppies? It's like, well, no, we don't put those in there. It's a style unto itself that I think there is a nod to a
Yeah.
natural setting for discus too, because as you uh, presumably observed in an expedition with Heiko, and just knowing about their natural environment, and you haven't attempted to make a carpeted complete aquascape underwater garden for, that's not practical either in terms of balancing fish and plants with discus. But where they would be in the wild would often not be a lushly planted place with a carpet of hair grass and
Yeah,
this kind of,
usually no plants.
right, exactly. So that's
Yeah,
where I
in
kind of
most
go, well,
cases,
hold
no
up,
plants. Yeah,
isn't isn't
because aquatic
isn't a
plants,
hardscape?
yeah, because fully aquatic plants are very rarely found in,
That's right.
natural
That's right.
water bodies. So the water body that they reside in actually don't have any plants. Like
That's what I've always wondered,
if
like
they have
why the hesitation to really explore the possibilities of the discus hardscape aquarium, which seems to get closer to biotope type conditions, and yet we just and
I
we
think
just
what it is
insist on putting the plants in there. And if you don't have plants, you're not going to get as many likes and subscribers. And the plant obsessed aquarists who can't even seem to acknowledge that there's a style in which we don't have plants in a freshwater
yeah.
aquarium, um, treat it like it's less than. And I'm saying, well, wait, this is still a totally natural aquarium style, and in many cases is more of a nod to how the fish would be found in the
Yeah,
wild.
you
So,
just don't want
um,
to argue with the general public on this because you know what I mean. Yeah, like
I do, I do.
yeah. So a lot of times, like a lot of these, um, if you do like great work, let's say, like you do like a very exquisite scape or artwork, right? It doesn't go viral at all. Like it won't. It just won't because
Good.
the general public's taste is not that high. Like in terms of expertise, not everybody is gonna have the same of level of expertise. But then if you have like just a tank full of duckweed, and all of a sudden like you get like millions of views, right? So it's just the acceptance of the general public's interest that like it's just not built for viral material. And then
Okay.
so which brings me to actually doubt myself like in terms of like the grotto, because the grotto received so much like nice comments and like like attention, and I'm like, oh crap, like is the grotto actually not that good? And then, is that why it's going viral? Yeah, so
No,
I don't know.
it's good. I wouldn't worry about, but I know what you mean though, and it's a very astute point, and that one that just as somebody that puts out a lot of different aquarium styles and kind of covers a lot of ground, to get a confirmation from someone like you who has a real good sense when you look at an aquarium on social media, etc. You have a, I would say, uniquely calibrated perception of what you're looking at. You can instantly know the variables involved. I mean, you just have a deeper sense of it because you're a professional, and so I think it's a good point that it. And I think I'm starting to come across on these podcasts like I might be insecure or worried about this stuff. I wouldn't call it that so much, but I do. You long for a way to get to engage in other styles and to do. I love aquariums. I'm always saying this. I love all. I keep reef tanks
Mm-hmm.
and goldfish, and I love live bearers and cichlids, and I just I have an appreciation for all of it. The discus planted tank, pure high level competition level aquascaping. All of it, growing SPS coral, etc. So in an age where everything is a little more niche oriented, or again, I love how you just put it about things. What stands to go viral is might not be. Don't get too caught up in that. I think is sort of the takeaway of it.
Yeah.
And the darndest things can go viral. I think the reason your tank has done so well and been so widely received is, it's an impressive sort of viewing window. The height and everything else just gives a nice impact that the standard panoramic or rectangular stretched out tank doesn't. So that's cool. I think that dimension plays to discus shape very well too. So when you see that image, let's face it, predominantly on our smartphones, in terms of what's posted on Instagram, it works. It fills the frame in a certain kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look compressed, and you've got the green is in there, and so it's the nature of the origins of this conversation in the first place. It's a mighty combination. There's something so alluring about the discus and what we love about the green and the aquarium. You're kind of bringing two things together that I guess that's my point in some way is that yes, we're bringing them together in a way that's there's no Java fern where the discus are found in the wild. And I'm not a hard biotope guy by any stretch, right? And that's why I think I just love a beautiful aquarium. I don't care if the fish and the plants are from two different places, hardly at all. But more of a curiosity, I guess, from someone
I feel
who's
like
in
there's.
you're in the position to do this for a living in a way that there's other modes of doing it that are, trust me, way more of a business model than
Mhm.
discus and plants in the client situation. And yet I wonder, like the discus hardscape is still, maybe it's just that I don't see it go viral. You may have a very profound point about that. It's like, oh, many people do it and they love it and it's out there, but it doesn't have the propensity to be in my feed as much. The algorithm hasn't determined it to be as favorable.
Yeah, I just think there's definitely a place for hardscape only, right? And especially with a lot of fish that are vegetarian,
Sure.
right? So
Yeah.
yeah, like for example, like panda waru or like any type of waru actually, and like or a lot of like there's a ton of fish that will just chew your plants up, so you can't really have real plants
Right.
if even if you wanted to with those fish. So so the hardscape only is definitely there's place for it, and then um it's just that not everybody wants to see like hardscape only, and then especially for somebody who actually don't know that much about like natural water bodies and like how like about fish, so they don't to them they're like, okay, is it like a little incomplete, right? Because like why
Right.
don't you have plants? But in the artistic sense and in the aquarium hobby, like from a hobbyist standpoint, I totally feel like hardscape only is a very impactful type of scape style to have. And then especially the way that a lot of the hardscape only setups you guys have done, especially pairing up with the like backlit background, it's yeah visually very impactful. And then
Well, thank you.
yeah, there's definitely a place for it, and I've been wanting to do some of something similar, right? Like in terms of visual results, but it just depends on like if the clients wants something,
Sure.
like if they
Of
agree with
course.
you, whatever. Yeah.
Right. And it's two worlds that don't often really commingle that much. What makes sense uh, for people like us who are doing this in a client installation situation, and we're doing it for, that's our livelihood, that's our business, uh, has a different, it's going to play different in the audiences and the tribes and the followings that we show certain kinds of things online to. That's why, we do a lot of things that we don't ever really show, and probably just should go ahead and do it. But we don't, because I feel like the audience sometimes has been sort of acclimated to a certain expectation, um, that, I mean, you've certainly seen the popularity of the grotto tank, such that I'm sure you've got a lot of other content out there, but you know that there's this is what people want to see, and that's why we do stuff in a certain kind of way on social media. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's not even a critique or any such thing. It's just like, well, it's just natural to do more of what's working, but
Yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
a
And
digression. I'm sure to our listeners it's not a terribly
yeah.
compelling topic, and stuff like you guys like you and I could probably sit and stew on that for a long time,
Well,
just because we're
but the thing is, like, our content is being shared on Instagram and other
sure.
social media platforms, and these social media platforms, especially Instagram, it's just very they're incentivizing, these contents that are like fast food, right?
Right.
It's like, when it comes to quality, maybe, like, quality is a very secondary thing to consider in terms of, like, how you want to be successful on these social media platforms. And then Instagram, like, right now, it's, only encouraging videos, and then very short content that's like super easily digestible, and
Yeah.
then you don't want to go into any depth in terms of artistics, or design. And then it's really like something like in your face. Like, you see it, and then it has shock value, all of that. So those are incentives that are, like, negatively um, encouraging content creators to, like, spend a lot of time trying to create, like, or even just artists trying to show off, like, their artwork. uh and then if you want to be more successful on, social media content, you really just have to nail down two things. One is high output, right? So it's like right now, especially with the algorithm, how they're evolving, that they're, like, kind of trying to replicate, the TikTok model, where, it's
Right.
very democratized and very they want to randomize, the exposure of content. So, like, obviously, the more you put out, the more chance of you winning that lottery, right?
Yeah.
To hit that, viral exposure. And then
Right.
the other thing is, like, consistency, right? So that goes hand in hand with high output. And then, yeah, so uh something quick, something, eye catching, like that, like, would be
Sure. Not a
ideal.
good place.
In
It's
this
not a good place to
environment.
sit and have to explain. It's not long format, that's for sure. So there's no chance to
No,
really
no, no.
explain why you did something in a certain kind of way. And we've all learned the comment section's not the place for that either. It just doesn't work. That doesn't, it becomes this very sort of tit for tat, back and forth kind of thing. I very seldom will have somebody give pushback to something. I'll kind of state the reason why it is the way it is, in some defense of why it's been done that way. And there's almost never a circling back where that same commenter goes, "Oh, okay, I see what you meant now. All right, that's not the game." So no, that's a
Yeah, I miss the
very
forum days, because the
right.
forums is a place where, you really want to, like, accumulate knowledge, and then you can actually learn, right? Like, it goes into a depth where, knowledge are accumulated, and the answers are being questions are being answered, and you can actually find the answers to answer, your own questions and whatnot. And then,
Yeah,
instead of, like, social media is more like just a comment, and then more of just some people leaving, like, a very quick feedback that they're feeling in that moment. And then, like, do they actually care? No. Do they actually want to find the answers? No. Right? And then
right.
they just move on, and then they're bombarded with information anyway, so they don't even have the bandwidth to go back to your reply and like just see like, oh, okay, yeah, like follow up with more questions and whatnot. It's just it's
Sure.
not a
It does. It gives it. It does make me. I do have concerns sometimes. Maybe this aquarium philosophy, for lack of a better way to put it, kind of maybe isn't having its best day there as far as that being where people are learning about it or whatever. But yeah, it is what it is. It's not.
Yeah, it's a
We
different
could.
thing, right? It has its own
Yeah.
place. For example, like it's
Right.
building a lot more exposure to our hobby. So like,
For sure.
new people, new blood are finding it and then getting interested in the hobby. So like, it has its place. And then
Yeah.
like, so I just tell my followers like, if you want to really learn and get into the hobby and be successful at keeping fish, and then go that extra step, uh,
There you go.
and
I
then
like
you
that.
go to the forums. But
I
then
like that.
yeah, if you're just looking for entertainment, yeah, social media is pretty entertaining.
Right. Or that's a good. It can be. It's a good point of inspiration or point of
Oh yeah,
entry.
for sure.
But
Yeah.
I think that's a great. That's a great sort of narrative to keep. By what you're saying there of like, yeah, if this has inspired you, let me point you to some places where you could take it further. That's a great approach actually, for sure. So yeah, before we wrap it up here, could you give me just a brief synopsis of the sequence with Heiko and what led up to something
Okay, yeah, sure.
I wanted to do for 20 years. And that's go out with him
You got to do it
in the
soon, man.
jungle.
The man's not getting any younger.
I know. Amazing. He's still out there at his age. I'm blown away. He's
Amazing.
out there
He's a
traipsing
legend.
through the jungle. Yeah, it is
He's a legend.
incredible.
So
Yeah.
we met actually at CIPS in China
Yep.
in
Yep.
2018, I want to say. And then
Okay.
I actually didn't know about him, before meeting him, or not long before meeting him. So
Yeah.
I actually found out about him in the from the book Dragon Behind the Glass. Uh,
Okay. Yeah. And then
yeah,
you end up going, wow, Rummy Nose Tetra, Amazon Sword. I mean,
I'm
some of
like,
these,
what is it? Like,
The Blair Eye
this
and the
guy
name of the
actually
scientific. Yeah.
exists? And then
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, like I really want to meet him. And then
Yeah.
I was going to CIPS, and then I found out, oh wow, like he's actually doing, like he has a booth, and he's judging like the biotope contest and everything. So I went up to him, and then like he needed like a translator. Like I'm fluent in Chinese, so he needed a translator, like, so I was like the best person to help him out. And through that,
Sure.
like, interactions and whatnot, and then he eventually, like, after the show, he actually reached out to invite me onto like one of the exhibitions. And then I was like, man, this is like a once in a lifetime type of experience. I have to go. So I like kind of like begged my wife to for like
Right.
letting me go. And then like it was a birthday gift for me.
Did you
So
have to get like all the? Don't you have to get like different inoculations, vaccinations to be able to go and get
that's
it?
what I
Did you?
thought. And then I checked with Heiko, and he's like, no, like we're going, like
Don't worry
we're
about it.
going
Yeah,
to
it's safe.
Blackwater, so like
Okay.
mosquitoes hate acidic water.
Okay.
So
Cool.
like we're not even going. No, that was a
Okay.
lie.
Okay.
'Cause, I mean, like I didn't get
You
a
weren't
shot, man.
fearful
I
of
was
your that you weren't overly fearful of your just your well being going down into this tropical areas
yeah,
with the.
I had my concerns, but
Okay.
then my concerns turned out to be just very
Normal anxiety about the unknown.
unnecessary, actually. Because yeah, in
Sure.
the like our expedition, like it was really safe. Like we hardly saw any wildlife actually, which was really sad. Because
Yeah.
the part of the river that we were exploring, um there's like native tribes, dotted along all alongside of the river. So over hunting, and then like there were even illegal mining on the river. So
Yeah.
a lot of
Sure.
that like contributed to lack of wildlife. And then versus I've heard that like in Brazil, like the environment is protected and the regulations are more firm. So the wildlife is more abundant. It could also be because that like is more downstream. So I'm not too sure. But When we went, right, and then like I initially had all these concerns. I'm like, like should I get shots and all that? Like Heiko basically is very cavalier in terms of like those kind of things.
Yeah.
For because he basically grew up in the jungle, so
Oh, yeah.
he's
Most of
like,
his life he's
no,
been there.
you don't need any of that. Like just come.
That's
And
cool.
then I'm like, okay. And then sure enough, like I got there, and then like just tons of mosquitoes, like because we're not in the Blackwater region all the time. And then so
Yeah.
like every time, like you're not in like a just purely Blackwater setting, like there's gonna be mosquitoes. And then good thing I brought like very strong insect repellents and whatnot.
Right.
But one interesting thing about that trip is like, so we got onto the river, and then Heiko just like jumped in for a swim, and then he drinks the black water straight out from the river, the black
Wow.
water part. And
Cool.
then I'm like, can you do that? Like, is that safe? Like, you're gonna get like parasites and whatnot. Like, don't like. Well, like in my mind, I was thinking that, right? Obviously, I didn't say that to Heiko, and then I just asked him like, "Is that like, can I do it?" And then he's like, "Yeah, like that's the best water, the cleanest water in the world."
Wow.
I was like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna stick with the bottled water that we carry."
Right.
And then
Heiko may have an adapted gut biome for this thing
right,
after all the
exactly. And then,
decades
but
down
the
there.
thing is, at the end of the 7 days, right? Like we actually ran out of the water that we brought, right?
Okay.
So every time we want to drink water, we have to like get the water from the river and boil it, and then drink it. And then imagine it's like kind of hot, and then you don't want to like drink hot water.
Right.
So
Right.
by the end of it, I was just like, fuck it, like
Yeah,
I'm just
totally.
gonna drink. Like the guy's like
I'm thirsty, man.
healthier than I am, and he's
Yeah.
like freaking like 80 years old. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna try it. I drank the black water, and it was the best tasting water I've ever
Wow.
tasted. Like I've tasted
Wow.
like mountain spring water, right? Like in
Sure.
Yosemite, and then those are like
Sure.
some pristine mountain like snow melt, right? But then it's just non-comparable. Like the water was
Wow.
so good tasting that it could be that like I was thirsty at the time as well. I
Right.
mean, but
You're like a
it's
week.
just
You say about a
it's
week. You're
great.
like a week in at this point, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
out there
yeah.
for
A
a week.
weekend, and then yeah, so I tasted it. It was really good. I actually carried a bottle with me, like of it, just like to keep on drinking it. And then after I came back from the trip, I was like, like better, check out if like I have any parasites in my stomach or whatever. And then it turned out I was just fine. Like it was completely fine.
That's cool. This could be the hot new bottled water trend. Next to
Oh
the you got
man,
The
it
Fiji
could
water, and
be.
then
Oh
you
wow,
got
hey
the
Jeff,
hey man,
we're on
because this
to
bottled
something.
water industry
Yeah,
is
like
out of control. But yeah,
that's
that
the
could be
real
the.
black water. You remember, like, there was a bottled water that's called black water. I don't
I
know
never
if you
saw that
remember
one.
that. Like there,
I never
yeah,
saw
there
that one.
used to be one that's like the water
Okay.
is actually black, right? It's like kind of look kind of nasty, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's the fake black water, right? This is like the actual
Okay. The
real
real
black
deal,
water.
it could be a
Yeah,
thing. But no, that's really cool. You're out there. Oh, you say when you guys like out there for a week in the jungle, like in the. Are you
complete jungle.
sleeping in
Yeah,
a? Yeah,
we
you just
basically.
pitching a tent or.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So we basically flew into Bogota, and then like took a took a car ride to like a little town, like, well, not a little town, but like a smaller town called Villavicencio, and then took a World War II era plane, right, twin
Wow.
propeller plane that's called DC-3, and then just like half cargo, half passenger. Like you're just sitting in the jump seat facing like all the luggages and whatnot,
Wow.
right? That's like strapped with a cargo net, and then the cockpit basically like the doors open, and then the pilot was like just so welcoming. Like I got in and out. Like I was filming everything with my GoPro and like 360 camera, and then I even like stuck out my 360 camera out of the like cockpit window to like, and then the pilot was like so chill.
Yeah.
And we flew to this port town on the river. It's called Porto Inirida. So it's on the Rio Inirida, which is a pretty big river. And then it basically meets I think Orinoco uh Atapapo, or no Atapapo, yeah, like it meets Atapapo. And then so that's a really good spot to collect autumns.
Okay.
Yeah. So we visited the fishery there, like, the farms and whatnot for autumns, and it was really impressive, right? And then
Wow.
so when we went into the river, we started going upstream. We actually went upriver for like over 200 miles, I think. Yeah, on like this raw steel boat, right? That says like
Wow.
8 max, and with the just a single propeller engine in the back. And then we had to, go over 5 rapids each way, right? So 10 in total. And then every time we go over a rapid, we have to, like, empty out the boat, right? Like, remove the engine and everything, and drag the boat over the rapid, ancient Egyptian style, with like logs,
Wow.
right? Like rolling on the bottom. And then some rapids will have like their locals to help us out, but some of them, like, they just nobody come to our rescue, and then we just have to do it ourselves. Yeah, it was quite a journey. And then by day 5, we Heiko hired this boatman who doesn't know how to fish, which is like the first time he's ever encountered that situation. So he's like just a bowman. He doesn't fish. And then so we ran out of food by day 5, and then we have to buy
Okay.
food from the local, and which was just like it was the food was very disgusting. The
Okay. Okay.
It was, yeah, it was
So
bad.
you
And
had
then
been the boat operator would also be catching fish that you would eat would be part of how you had gotten
usually
to that
it's
point.
yeah, usually they're also fishermen, so they'll catch the fish that we'll eat as well. But then,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
in this case, like, he was just a bowman, and then he actually asked us for food, and then we're like, oh man, like, yeah. So we ran out of
Uh-oh.
food by day 5, and then
Why do I
we
picture Heiko, no matter how disgusting the food looks, he's just eating it down like it's no big deal. I don't know. It just
Oh
seems
yeah,
like
I
he would
mean,
be
like, he will eat
the
anything really. Like,
sure.
he's seen it all. And
Oh
then
yeah.
so we reached the waterfall that we wanted to go explore by like day 4. And then the waterfall is like this one, like, really unique black water waterfall, right? So the waterfall is like 30 meters tall, and then very big for what, especially black water. And then
Okay.
the chief, like, of a tribe, like the tribe's chief, yeah, um, who was in charge of that region, had to bring us in there, because we have to navigate through like these, like, very small, they call canoes. So like they're basically like channels, right? And then
Mhm.
so we get in with the chief, and then he was asking Heiko like what, we want to do there. And then Heiko was like, oh yeah, we want to try to find some fish, like, under the waterfall. And the chief just laughed at him. He's like, no, there's no fish under the waterfall, like, don't even waste your time, whatever. And then sure enough, we found, all kinds of like different plateaus and whatnot under the waterfall. And the chief was actually kind of surprised. He's like,
All
wow, like,
right. Didn't know
yeah,
those were
they're
there.
actually fish there.
Been
Yeah.
here for 5,000 years. I've never known those were there.
Yeah,
That's
so
awesome, man.
it's a great trip.
What an experience. Yeah, and just as you were telling it, I had just a very cool
Oh, you have to go, like,
visual
Jeff,
picture
you really
playing.
have to
Oh
go.
yeah. No, I
Yeah,
know.
it's
I
not
know.
like all
He's been
fun and
bothering me
games
to do
because,
it for a long time. I've just
yeah,
but
yeah,
knowing you don't got to go, he could take you someplace where it's not especially dangerous or you're not uh
oh,
you
they're
know,
definitely dangerous, but it's
there's
not
danger.
in
No,
the
there's
sense
no
of,
escaping the danger, but
well,
um
it's not the sense of danger that you think of. So, like, when before the trip, I thought like the dangers would be like, the caimans, the anacondas, and then um, like poisonous, like venomous spiders and whatnot, and so like those kind of stuff, right? And then like
right,
virus and whatnot. So
right,
none of
right.
those. The danger
Okay.
was actually in, for example, during the boat, right? Like during the boat ride, we actually breached onto a huge rock that's just in the middle of the river. Like the river is like almost like half a mile wide, right? It's a really wide river, and then we were traveling, in the middle of it, and all
Right.
of a sudden there's a rock that's like two just below the surface, like 2 or 3 inches below the surface, and the boat just
Right.
ram onto that rock because can't like we can't see it.
Good.
And
Yeah.
then like had us had it like go any further onto the rock, we'll have like hit the propeller, right, and break the engine, and then we'll get stranded. All the
Right.
equipment could have like the boat could have capsized, and like we just all get into the river. Drowning could be a possibility, but then all
Sure.
the equipment surely would have been lost and whatever, and then we will
Right.
have to wait for the government or like the officials to rescue us out of that situation. So that's a danger. And then also the plane that we took, right, the World War II era plane. So
This is not
Heiko
some
was
FAA regulated stuff here. This is
Heiko was assuring me that it's the safest aircraft in
right.
the history of aviation. And then
Okay.
like not even 2 weeks after I got back into LA, like my one of the teammates from the expedition sent me this a news article, and then it's I think it was from Peru or Colombia, I forgot. But then one of these planes went down and all the passengers died. Like just not even 2 weeks after,
Same
my
model and everything.
expedition.
A plane you were
Same
had been
model,
on.
yeah. Same
Yeah.
model.
The Heiko's proclaimed safest plane on the planet. It's
Yeah.
it can happen, but
definitely,
man, wow, wow,
definitely take a grain of salt with that.
amazing, amazing, man. Well, Mark, it's been a great conversation, man. Really,
Thank you, thank you.
as usual, it's gone longer than I planned. I always say this in these podcasts, but I mean, I love the conversation. I find your insights on this vital style too from the grotto tank. I think is just a wealth of great information there, and really admire everything you're doing. And
Thank
glad
you,
we got
thank
to
you, thank you.
know each other in this conversation too, man. And look forward to collaborating and working with you any way that we can going forward. And
Looking forward to that. Yeah, I've been, like I said, great admirer of ADG for a long time. So, yeah, I feel like a visit is long overdue, and I'll,
yeah,
definitely try my best to, make it to you guys, in the coming year.
awesome. Please do, Mark. Seriously, please do. We'd love to have you. Again,
Cool.
thanks so much, and look forward to talking to you again.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Okay, bye.